Okay, let's call the meeting to order. We'll start with the roll call.
Ms. Bex, Ms. Harrell,
Here.
Ms. Hetland,
Present.
Ms. Jones, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Madica,
Here.
Ms. Orcherton,
Here.
Mr. Pania, Ms. Salmon,
Here.
Ms. Williams.
Okay. Next, we'll move to approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Did anybody have any changes or comments they wanted to make? Okay.
I'll move approval of those minutes.
Second. Okay, great for guessing. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the staff report. Go ahead, Rachel.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Wonderful to see you. Here's your September staff report. I'm going to move quickly. It's a lot of slides, but bear with me. I just wanted to give you kind of first and foremost an outlook on what our staffing looks like these days. So as you are aware, and maybe for new people if you're not, we typically are a one-person show to a degree, and then on occasion we have different staff members. Sometimes it's in the past been a public arts intern. We most recently were able to hire a position of a program specialist that is working both with the arts program and with the Urbana's Market at the Square Farmers Market. So that person was actually intending to come tonight and see you. Her name's Heather Ann, and she recently had a baby, so she's been out on maternity leave, but she comes back next week. I'm excited to have her back with us because we made a lot of progress on the arts grants when she had started. So you'll get a chance to meet her for sure coming up here soon. But to kind of paint another picture of some of the different staffing that we've had, I've got Emmy Muckenhorn here behind me, who's one of our arts and culture interns. Emmy and Aria are the two that are still and presently on staff from our summer youth employment program. So we had a grant from the Illinois Arts Council to hire 2 summer youth employees. Emmy's one of them. We also worked with, and this is Aria, our other intern, who wasn't able to be here today, but the 2 of them will be wrapping up their work with us by September 21st. And that will kind of, at least for the time being, and the Illinois Arts Council youth employment relationship that we have there, although we do apply for it annually, and we've received it every year we've applied for it. So I am hoping to have another intern next year. And I did learn that we can actually apply for to fund up to 4 interns, so I might consider actually getting us some more interns for next summer through that program. Another program that we were able to form a relationship with this past summer is Care for You, and that's the Urbana School District's program with the Regional Planning Commission. So it's a grant with the Regional Planning Commission. It paid for our intern Kay. Now Kay just wrapped up their experience with us, but we have a lot of interns that could be coming through that program, especially because there's a a spring version of this program. It's not exactly Care for You, but it's run by some of the same people in the school district, and it's called the Executive Internship in the spring. So I've applied for us to be a site for that internship as well, and it might be then that we have another student that just works with us from usually Urbana High School, and that student will be just working with us in the spring semester for them at roughly 10 hours a week, and it's paid for through a different grant. So that's wonderful because it's at no cost to our program. Lastly, I want to mention the Youth Employment Services, which is actually Champaign's version of Care for You, and we've been talking with them about the Urbana's Arts and Culture program being a site that could actually take Champaign students to work with us. So we may also have some new students that come on either later this fall or in the spring through that program, but I hope to have an update about what they call the YES program later, hopefully next month. I'm meeting with the person from this staff tomorrow, and so hopefully I'll have an update after that. Also, we've been working with the School of Social Work, as you know, through the Community Learning Lab, and as I mentioned in our last meeting, we have Social Work Class 461, so 3 students from that class who are working with the program every Monday from 1 to 3 from now till the end of December, well, till finals week in December, I should say. And those students just started this past Monday, so they'll be working 1 to 3 every Monday moving forward, and on occasion working events with us. And it's really to give them a field experience, so they get class credit, and it's part of a class for them to be here with us, and I'll help assign them a grade at the end of the semester. I also want to mention the Women in Leadership program because we have 3 students from that program that are also going to be with us. They have a different type of schedule. The Women in Leadership program comes from the YWCA at the University of Illinois. We're going to have between 3 and 4 students work with us. They work in a group. And that project I've actually administered with them as a site person in my previous couple of positions. So I'm really familiar with the program. It's a very easy program to work with. The students usually observe the organization for a period of time, typically 1 full semester. So they will be like kind of volunteering and helping with things, but they're supposed to be largely an observation. And then they give a proposal at the end of the semester, so late December. I prefer them to give the proposal to you instead of me. So I'm going to have them come to our meeting to do that. And their proposal is something they think could benefit or enhance the work that we do. And they're proposing a project that they would then take on spring semester and do themselves largely with my supervision. But I think that'll be a fun thing for our program to have. They will interact with you, I hope, even more so than me in terms of giving that presentation. But that'll be something that'll come up in December. So that brings us to just general current project updates. I want to particularly mention that the end of this week on Friday, September 13th, kicks off Welcoming Week 2019. This is an initiative of many of our local immigration organizations, as well as the New American Welcome Center housed within the YMCA. I just wanted to mention in part the kickoff that is this Friday, 4 to 7 p.m., and also include with that a plea. It would be lovely to have 1 commissioner or 2 actually come and help us table on behalf of the Urbana Arts and Culture program. It's 4 to 7 p.m. out there in the Orpheum parking lot, so the parking lot outside of Orpheum Children's Museum. There's going to be live music, all kinds of activities, artists selling their wares, but we are going to have a table there. And because one of our interns is out of town, it really just leaves Emmy and myself. I'm hoping that I can get 1 or 2 other helpers, particularly for that event, and selfishly because it is my birthday this weekend and I'm not hoping to stay for the full length of the event, and it would be lovely if we could have another volunteer. So that's something that would be an opportunity for you or both commissioners who've been around for a while or new commissioners to get to know our programs. I want to mention that the whole week has events, and we submitted and contributed some events. In fact, can I have you, Angela, pass along this event calendar listing? So we have these, and I don't recall which ones I grabbed. So there's actually French, English, and Spanish ones. I don't know which one you have. Hopefully you have one in a language you can read. But that is a full listing of all the events that were submitted. And you'll notice that we have, in particular, our exhibition submitted that's called Belongings. This is the exhibition. For those of you who are new, we did this exhibit last year, and our Artists of the Corridor exhibits are housed partially here at the city, partially at the Urbana Free Library. So it's a dual site exhibition. We took photographs of artifacts that have meaning for local immigrants as connected to their story of immigration. And then the story was also captured as well on a little plaque that goes with each photograph. So those are going to be on display here. And we, for the first time ever, were able to partner with Spurlock Museum to have a display of the actual artifacts. So that was installed this week, and you'll be able to see that in the display cases at Spurlock, as well as later, which is not featured in that event listing, in November, we're going to be having our closing reception for that, and our closing reception includes a open scene slam, stories from local immigrants that we'll have going on there in Spurlock Museum with the artifacts behind them. So we're really excited about that. And there'll be opportunities to become a story reader. So if you have any interest in reading a story on behalf of somebody that is unable to read their story for whatever reason, that's another way you can volunteer at that event. And lastly, the week ends with the Immigrant Welcome Awards. We consider this kind of the unofficial opening of the Belongings exhibit. So that's September 21st. Again, this exhibit stays up through November, but the opening is also where the Welcome Awards take place, and that's a number of awards are given out to local immigrants, usually a student award, a business award, an activist or community civic leader award. So there's lots of opportunities. There are also, I believe, recently awarded some of these, and I got word that a couple of people that I nominated got the award. So I'm really excited because they're connected to our program, and I will certainly, once that's public, we'll share that with you. I heard direct from the people, but I haven't seen a press release go out yet. And then, but that's really the Immigrant Welcoming Week activities. I'd love to see our commission involved in any way that you're able. It's a wonderful initiative of our area. That brings me to the Poet Laureate. Just a brief update. You've heard some of the activities of the Poet Laureate underway. Poets on a Park Bench is one of them. Frank, our new Arts Commissioner, was able to participate in one of those episodes. So you'll hear Frank and his poetry on one. But we've had a lot of interest in those things. And we have new prompts weekly from our Poet Laureate. So follow that page if you don't already. It's Urbana Poet Laureate Will Rieger on Facebook. And that's a full listing of all the upcoming opportunities for local writers, any initiatives of his, and then he gives out like weekly prompts. This, again, Poets on a Park Bench is another opportunity. Here's some pictures from some of our recent ones. And that brings me then to Art Now, which features Laurel Noblette and Sean Tierney. Now, the two of them had come previously and presented on their grant report. They did that Let It Go project that you might remember. So the Art Now episode really features that work and some of their larger body of work as multimedia artists. Oh, and for those of you who are new and aren't as familiar, Art Now is our mini documentary series on local artists. So these are 15-minute long episodes that air on Urbana Public Television. If you're not familiar, UPTV actually is housed right here. They have offices on either side. And work very collaboratively with us to produce these episodes on a monthly basis. They also air it as on radio and on YouTube. So you can find and excite yourself by watching any and all 101 episodes that we now have of this program. 102.
Going
All
for
right.
the next 100, right?
Yeah, wait for the next 100. It's going to be so great. So we also have Urbana's Downtown Get Down recently wrapped up. I want to just mention that, we in general, the committee met yesterday to debrief. We felt very strongly that this was a pretty successful first summer. We were pretty happy. We, of course, want to see it grow in numbers and everything, but just to kind of paint a picture of some of the numbers for you, we were able to feature over 75 individual local artists, over 45 unique community organizations and maker groups, over 100 area events held in downtown businesses, and we estimated that we averaged between 700 and 1,000 folks at each one. Now, of course, at Sweet Corn Festival, this is actually our July, but Sweet Corn Festival was enormous. So Sweet Corn Festival is already really a wonderful event. You're going to hear a report about that in a moment. I would wager that the collaboration between the Get Down and Sweet Corn enhanced Sweet Corn this year and enhanced the Downtown Get Down, so it was very mutually beneficial. This is Brandon Washington from New Souls. He's also played this weekend at Elnora. You can see some pictures here of some of the activities we had on our side of the Downtown Get Down Sweet Corn collaboration. And this is a picture of the crowd, so you can really get a sense of how many people were there. It felt really packed, and it was quite a successful event. I want to mention Urbana Summer Movie Nights and show you a couple pictures in particular, because you've heard me talk about it, but if you haven't been able to get out, I thought this was a pretty fun addition. Our most recent film was Loving Vincent, about the death of Vincent van Gogh. It's a very heartfelt, kind of heartbreaking movie, but was really beautiful. And if you aren't familiar, it took, I believe, over 80 artists created 30,000 paintings, might have even been more than that, to animate. And so the movie's made entirely out of actual paintings that have been animated. It's the first ever film of its kind like that. So we were able to kind of celebrate the arts. But we also had the historic popcorn truck out from the Champaign County History Museum. It's the 100th anniversary of this popcorn truck's existence, so that was really exciting. And this is just some pictures of kind of what we were able to fabricate in terms of a screen, and that was with the help of Jake Metz and Matt Harsh. And so we've actually talked about adding a couple of films potentially just in this next month or two. Right now we're particularly looking at collaborating with the Urbana Free Library to do one in the fall that'll be announced hopefully at the next meeting. And some pictures from our most recent Art at the Market. This features Jean-René Belliquita, and you can see our interns here, and they ran their own corn-themed crafts and to promote sweet corn in the Downtown Get Down. And they even dressed up as Corny. So that was lovely. But our next one is actually, again, in honor of Welcoming Week. We're going to have the Afro-Caribbean Jazz Collective, and we'll have also both Paulina Camacho, who was funded for her mobile art cart, you might recall, and Weiskamp Screen Printing doing crafts around butterflies and the theme of migration and celebrating Welcoming Week. We also, on October 26th, have our Market at the Scare coming up. A lot of the same activities of last year, plus more. So save the date for that and plan to come to the farmer's market and wear a Halloween costume. It's another really fun one to volunteer at if you as a commissioner would like to volunteer. These are some pictures from last year so you can get a sense of all the different activities we had going on, from spooky music, from Urbana Pops Orchestra, to puppet shows, to crafts, to cosplay. We had a lot happening. Our most recent Young Artist Studio featured manga art from Kofi Bazell Smith and was really wonderful and successful. It was the first time that we had a Young Artist Studio that catered to a little bit of an older audience, and we had good turnout for that. This next one comes up on this Sunday, the 15th, and that's going to feature African drumming. It's going to actually be a workshop to learn about different African drums and then to make an African drum craft. So you kind of manufacture their own little mini drum. The Drum Studio is also going to be kind of a precursor to the CU Black and African Arts Festival scheduled for next weekend. So it's going to help promote that and kind of be a lead-in to that event. And it's going to be organized on Sunday by Cindy and Susan Ogwell, who are also organizing that festival. Just as a quick update, I've mentioned Tumble Arch in previous meetings. For those of you who are new, I just wanted to leave this slide on here. This is an example of some of the work we do around the sculpture project. This is a sculpture that's being sponsored by private donors, and we're looking for a good spot for it. So it will be installed in the fall. We're just verifying which spot we prefer. We found 2 viable options for it to be in downtown. And then I want to mention that in your report I included that I'm also working with the library. You might recall that the Library Foundation Board pledged $1,000 towards our installation of Races, which is the sculpture that appears here on this slide. And it's on the corner, it's on Race Street, and it's on the corner of the library's property. The pledge was to plant some flowers this past spring, and you might notice that didn't happen for whatever reason. I've been in touch with them about another idea I had, which was to install solar lighting to light the sculpture at night, which I think might have year-round appeal for the time that it's there. I also drive by at night, and I'm like, I wish I could see it. So I think that it will be something that really enhances the sculpture. So they're looking into that.
I have a question. How will you secure it? Because they're getting, the ones we put in our yards,
Are they getting
in our neighborhoods, are getting
Yeah.
lifted. How will you secure them? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, so we'll have to
I think it's a great
research
idea
that.
to really show it off well.
Yeah.
Because so often you just pull up the light at the stop sign and you're watching traffic and you don't have a moment to really enjoy it.
Yeah. So I think it will be, if we can figure out a way to make it work, I think it could really enhance that space.
Yeah.
Again, Murals on Glasses will be announced very soon. We're just kind of getting all that together to go out. Cunningham Township is the selected spot. If you're unfamiliar with Murals on Glass, this is our program that invites artists to submit digital images of artwork that are then printed on adhesive vinyl and applied to windows in our downtown area. So it's a way of doing a mural without exactly doing a mural. And it's a different version of a mural project, and that's what we've had for a while. When you drive around downtown Urbana, try to take a look at some of the ones that we have around. We have a full listing of them on our website, of course, but it's a really great way to see a lot of public art from people who may not consider themselves muralists, but get to see their art up on a building. We're also, for the first time, going to be piloting a utility box wrap program. So, again, you'll see these applications come out, and my hope was to get them out before this meeting, but hopefully next week you'll see them pop up. Please share them where you can, because we'll be soliciting some, obviously some submissions, but the other thing I want to put in your radar is that I will be asking arts commissioners to sit on that jury. Usually 1 or 2 sit on that jury, so if you have a particular interest in helping select the art, let me know at the end of this meeting, because I'd love to know. And I'll put you on the committee, no questions asked. Lastly, exactly. Lastly, I just want to mention, I always am trying to do more to do outreach and kind of between tabling, like I mentioned the tabling on Friday. I also participated in the International Student Welcome that happened on campus. So it was like in the stadium on campus. It was a big welcome. All the students, as they went in, passed all of our tables. And there was only about 15 tables, so every table got a lot of attention. We were able to get a lot of people signed up, either interested in learning about our programs or a lot of people who wanted to volunteer. Good. So I was excited to hear about that. I'm going to work to get kind of a more established volunteer program going. But I wanted to also mention that I'm giving a talk at the School of Art and Design this fall. It's actually it's not open to the public, so it's not something I will promote as part of our grant workshops, but it effectively is a grant workshop. So it's going to feature my grant presentation, kind of a smaller version of it, and then 2 of the grantees that received grants at the School of Art and Design this past cycle are going to talk about the experience of being a grantee, so that'll be kind of nice too.
Good.
But I wanted to mention that so you know some of the things that I'm doing on a regular basis to get the word out and do outreach for the
Go
program.
ahead, Barb.
Would they might possibly record it or live stream it, so you'd have it
That's a good
available for the
question.
website, perhaps?
I could ask them that. You know, I think it also might be possible that when we do our grant workshops, and I'll be giving probably roughly 8, which is what I gave last year, that I could also consider doing a similar format where I invite a couple of grantees, usually unofficially in the room. That already does happen because there's usually people that have received a grant before and like chime in on their experiences. But that's certainly something that maybe enhances it for somebody that's listening. I've been able to benefit from saying to them that I wear the hat of somebody who's gotten a grant before I took this position, so that I have the experience of knowing what it was like to be on the applicant side of things and can usually answer some of their questions, but it'll be fun to have some other perspective there.
Maybe you could hook it up to the website.
Yeah. I think a digital version of that presentation will be good in general to do this year at some point. But that's the end. That's your update. Thanks for listening.
Oh,
Any
Rachel,
questions?
did you want to introduce the new
Oh, yes,
commissioner?
I'm sorry, and I even have it right here. That brings me to the thing I should have said at the beginning, which is that I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our newest commissioners. So you all received an email, but for anyone watching or listening, we have 3 new commissioners, and I want to just give a brief introduction to each. I'm not going to fully read these bios that I sent to you, but I'll read a portion of them. So the first I'll mention is Angela Williams. Angela, hello. Angela is the Associate Director at the Center for South Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the university, where she's worked on cultural programming related to Middle East and South Asia for campus and community audiences for the past 10 years. She has her MA and BA in linguistics and then studied Arabic and the Arabic language at American University in Cairo. I'm really fascinated by your dissertation topic, which involves articulating women's rights through hip-hop in the Middle East. So has a lot of interest in figuring out how to help marginalized folks really take center stage in many ways around the kinds of work that we do, and I'm excited that you'll bring that expertise, so thank you. I also want to introduce Frank Modica. Hey, Frank. Frank is a retired special education teacher who worked in Urbana School District 116 for 32 years. He's a member of the Quintessential Poets of Champaign-Urbana, with whom he's given public readings and performances. He's published his poetry in a wide array of poetry journals. I won't list them all, but they are listed in his bio. And he's also participated in some of the activities of our Poet Laureate and some of our programs already, so I'm excited for his passion for really encouraging the creative writing and the art of poetry and writing in general, because I think our writing projects are starting to kind of emerge as another important creative sector in the work that we do at the arts program. Luis Gonzalo Pinilla is also here as a multimedia artist and current doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois School of Art and Design. Gonzalo is an art historian. He hails from Colombia, and his work explores the history of printmaking and social culture in South America. He has his MFA in print media and his BFA from the Universidad Nacional de Colombia. And he is a 3-time recipient of our arts grants. So I also consider him someone who is very well versed in what it's like to be a grantee. Excuse me. And so I'm really excited that you'll be able to bring that perspective too. His passion is for art projects that focus on the lived experiences of immigrants and international families. And all 3 of his art projects had a particular kind of focus like that as an artist and a cultural worker himself. So he's interested in promoting cultural activities and increasing accessibility. I think as we move towards envisioning how our arts program can speak to a lot of the needs in the community and also elevate different creative sectors, I'm just so excited that around the table we have people that represent different kinds of art. We have people that have expertise in different areas of the world. I think you're a very strong commission, and I'm excited for what we co-create together. But thank you to the 3 of you for joining us. And you'll have a chance to obviously get to know each other a little bit more over the course of the next few years, but also later when we have a meetup. And then just as a note about that before I hand off the mic, as a reminder, when we do meet, there are, and you will get some onboarding materials, the new folks around the room, but we do due to having Open Meetings Act, we always encourage you when you're meeting, do not talk about the program, especially in groups of more than 2 people at a time. It's a violation of the Public Meetings Act. So if you're going to have a lively discussion about the future of the program, and with more than just one person, that's officially a public meeting, and so it needs to be noticed so that the public is able to know that it's happening. And that's, in the spirit of government transparency, so we want to make sure that you know that rule. So that means tonight, when we hang out later, it's time for getting to know you and less of a talking about your ideas for the program or debating things.
It's much nicer than
Thanks.
that online survey. Do you remember taking that survey, that long online survey that we all had to take as part of our training? Several years ago.
Vaguely.
I like your presentation better.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Okay, next we're going to have a grant presentation from Gina Johnson of the Urbana Business Association for the Urbana Sweet Corn Festival. Hi, Gina.
Hi, I'm sorry. Before we move on to this portion of the meeting, I need to leave. So this is my last meeting, but I just wanted to thank everybody for everything. It's been a wonderful experience, and I think the things, Rachel, that you're doing with the program, I think are really terrific. We've seen so much growth, and we're really headed in an awesome direction. So I'll still be here and be a part of it, but unfortunately, I'm going to make my exit. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your
So I failed to actually honor Katie in the way that I was hoping to because my head's a little foggy. I've had a sinus infection for a full week. That's my excuse. But I want to give us all an opportunity to thank her. So it doesn't have to be a big deal. I promised her I wouldn't make it into a big deal. But I want to particularly thank you for your years of service here with us and for everything that you've been able to offer, all your insights, the way you jump in. It's just been really helpful in so many ways. So I thank you so much for the time that you've put into the commission.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, go
All
ahead,
right,
Gina.
thank you.
Yeah.
So like Rachel said, my name is Gina Johnson, and I'm here on behalf of the Urbana Business Association to present the Urbana Arts Grant Tier 3 report on the Urbana Sweet Corn Festival. So we'll get started. Just bear with me because I'm not super familiar with the report.
Can I just make a quick note? So for anyone who doesn't know, the executive director of Urbana Business Association, Paris Balderota, resigned from her position recently to pursue her restaurant, Balderota's, full-time, which has recently moved into Lincoln Square Mall and delicious, so you should all go eat there. But Gina and actually myself have stepped into the role of co-chairing that board of directors. So Gina agreed to come give the presentation today, and that's the context of why she might not know every detail in the report she didn't write. But the report is something that you got to in your email, and hopefully you have in front of you.
Yeah, I was at the festival most of the weekend, so I can speak to that. Yeah, yeah, right? Yeah, experiential. Yeah, most important. So first and foremost, the 2019 marked the 45th anniversary of the Sweet Corn Festival.
That's a milestone in itself.
We had record attendance this year. Approximately 30,000 people
Wow.
attended. Over 20,000 ears of corn were sold. We sold out of corn. Yeah.
That's a problem to have.
Yeah, it's a good problem, right? Yeah. Each year we bring a diverse lineup of music and arts to our Sweet Corn Festival. We partner with Sousa Archives and CU Folk and Roots to make that possible each year. As a part of the lineup, we feature performances of the marching bands from Central, Centennial, and Urbana high schools. We also feature local cultural groups performing traditional dances. Pictured here is the Bali Lantari, I apologize for any mispronunciation, group performing on the One Community Together stage. This year we also teamed up with Riggs Beer Company from Urbana. And through this partnership, we were able to increase beer sales. We were able to decreased volunteers needed for the festival. They supplied the beer tents, and they supplied workers and all POS. This year also marked the first collaboration between Urbana's Downtown Get Down and the Sweet Corn Festivals. I personally heard a lot of great feedback about both festivals coming together. A lot of people felt that, from the feedback that I received, that Get Down brought a lot of diversity to, a lot more diversity to the Sweet Corn Festival. We featured a dynamic performance from New Souls. And we also had the Good Things Urbana project. That's a project that my team and I spearheaded this summer. This project is all about getting people out to create art and focus on positive things, hopefully positive things just in their lives and in the community. I'm a mental health therapist, and I really see a need and hear a need a lot for more just active, creative and interactive activities within the community. And so I took the initiative to get a team together this summer and provide this activity. I think we have about 500 canvases that we collected and people made throughout the summer. It was really a big goal of mine to get adults to participate, and a lot of adults did participate in this. So Rachel and I hope to create a public art installation called Good Things Urbana with all of the canvases that people drew this summer. And this is DJ Silky leading us in dance performances. I can say that DJ Silky really got the crowd going. Our booth was right by her booth, and people were really enjoying it and having a lot of fun with the music. And there was music well into the evening. I think New Souls was a good follow-up to DJ Silky. The crowd definitely reflected the wide diversity of our community. And a lot of audience participation throughout the whole night. I've even had people contact me and ask when the public art installation will be up, that they want to see their canvas. And so people became really invested in this. I think that it helped that we were there May, June, July, and August, so they saw us at each event too. We also had a strong showing of volunteers who helped make the festival possible. UBA is a 1 to 2 person staff, and this festival is made possible with a lot of volunteer support. We also want to acknowledge the City of Urbana for dynamic assistance this year with marketing, particularly some corny features like this one on UPTV. Oh, okay. Where is this at? I'm an Apple person. Wait, can you say? Okay. Got it.
Gee, Tiffany, thanks for letting me ride along with you. I'm really looking forward to learning what you do as a parking enforcement officer in the city of Urbana.
No problem. Thank you for joining me. Now make sure you have your seatbelt on.
Thanks for the reminder. And I'm going to turn my cell phone off and put it away.
Okay, and I'll get some music going for us.
Great. Well, I'm just looking forward to seeing what you guys do and how this whole enforcement operation operates. Oh, jeez.
Corny.
Corny, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be getting ready for the Sweet Corn Festival. What's he saying?
I don't speak corn language.
Jeez. Well, where's Katie the Corn Whisperer when we need her? She was around here the other day.
Corn cobs in the air if you got them. Now we move to your left. Move to the left. Now we move to your right. Now we do a turn. Wait. I heard a cry from the fields. I'm all ears. Hi. Hi, Tiff. Colonel.
Mayor.
Oh. Hi, Corny. What's poppin'?
Well, Corny was trying to tell us about the Sweet Corn Festival, but we can't understand what he's saying. Can you help?
I sure can. Well, folks, what Corny is so excited about is that the 45th Sweet Corn Festival is right around the corner on August 23rd and 24th in beautiful downtown Urbana. It's always free to enter and family-friendly, too. There will be all kinds of local food, entertainers, and vendors on the streets, and everybody's favorite, sweet corn. The fun begins Friday at 5 p.m. and lasts until midnight. And then we'll do it all over again on Saturday from 11 a.m. until midnight. He hopes to see you there.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Corny. We'll see you at the festival.
Are you ready to do this, Mayor?
Well, I certainly am. Things are popping in Urbana. Snack?
No, thanks.
Well, I'll just put it right here in your corn holder.
Really?
That's clever. That's really clever.
Probably Jason.
Yeah, that could be.
I go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So none of those are working.
Uh-oh.
Thanks.
Smash.
Yeah.
Try turning it off and putting it back on again.
Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there it is.
Oh, that's nice.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The support from the city of Urbana is what makes Sweet Corn Festival possible. And awards like this possible. Sweet Corn was named the first place in the People's Choice Awards from the News Gazette as the #1 ranked community event. The festival is beloved, and we know it will continue to bring music, recreation, and the best of the Midwest for years to come.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, thanks very much, Gina.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking it easy on me, too.
No problem.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay, next we're going to have Rachel talk about some proposed changes to the 2020 grant timeline.
I don't have actually a presentation that's going with this, so I'm just going to minimize this. So I just want to take a moment to talk to you about some proposed changes. You have a document in front of you. Also, we wanted to talk a little bit more about this first year, and this is for our commissioners for whom this isn't your first meeting, a little bit about the Tier 3 process this past year, any feedback or things that would make it easier for you. Let me start first by talking to you a little bit about the changes I'm proposing, and then I'd love to invite any of your feedback about what you would like to see to make it an easier process on you. I'm happy to incorporate any of your suggestions, and then we'll hopefully settle on a plan for this 2020 grant season that's going to come up upon us pretty soon. So this is a proposal for some of the changes as well as dates and deadlines. Let me first just go to this summary of changes. So one thing in particular is I want the entire process to occur a little earlier in the year, and this will allow for some more, not simply time for our staff to process things, which is of utmost importance to me, but some of the Tier 3 grantees in particular have really wanted to maybe even get notice about their grant a lot sooner. And because they run major festivals and events, we can obviously understand why that might be important. So in the proposal you have before you, we have a suggestion of doing
Rachel,
Tier 3.
Before we go any farther, for the people who are new, can you just explain the difference between the 3 tiers?
Good call. Yes, of course I can. So for folks that are new, you may know that we have and are most known for an arts grant program. This program over the years has had a number of different categorizations in terms of our small, medium, and large grants. This past year, we revised the categories so they really do reflect simply that small, medium, and large. Previous years, we've had them have different names, or maybe they focus more on individual versus group, nonprofit, et cetera. We decided to simplify last year. So what we did is we redesigned the program so that Tier 1 is our smallest grant category. That's between $500 and $1,500 grants. Tier 2, is $2,000 through $4,500 grants. And Tier 3 is designed to be $5,000 to $10,000 grants. All three have different requirements. So for instance, Tier 1 does not necessarily require any matching funds or in-kind funds. Tier 2 does require in-kind funds up to 50%, and they require matching funds up to 50%, and in-kind can be used towards that match. I didn't include that on here, but that's also maybe another area that we might examine, and it could simply be 25% of the matching funds can come from in-kind, but keeping some level of cash match possible for Tier 2 I think might be in our interest. I saw a lot of people applying just with in-kind listed, and it might be just nice to know if we're giving out a mid-sized grant in our what we call our mid-size. I think it's important that we ask for some cash match of some kind. And then Tier 3 requires a 70% cash match. So our grant should represent no more, up to 30% of the total cost and operating budget of the event. And that really is designed for major events, festivals. Sweet Corn Festival was in that tier, so the presentation you just heard. But it also includes things like Pygmalion Music Festival that's coming up next weekend. And I should correct myself, Pygmalion, and because it's more than a music festival. But, and some of the other things like Boneyard Arts Festival, we've had funded through there. CU Folk and Roots, that's coming up. So those are our Tier 3 grants, and the distinction too is that Tiers 1 and 2, as of last year, are done through a jury, and that's always been traditionally how we do our grants. But Tier 3 is now done completely with you as the Arts and Culture Commission, so you decide those directly. When we have a jury, we usually do have a couple of commissioners serve on each jury, so every time we jury something with our program in general, we have some commission representation there. So it's not that the commission's uninvolved. But the juries usually are comprised then of some different experts, usually representing a diversity of creative sectors, fields, experiences, awareness. All these things are taken into consideration in how we kind of compose a jury. And I will say that they tend to be between 5 and 6 people on a jury, usually no more than that. And as far as the Tier 3 process then, the way we've structured it is that, and this is what I think we get to kind of talk about tonight about how this worked, but this last year, what we had is we had them come to one of our meetings, every applicant. We didn't have a huge number of applications. In fact, all of them got funded last year because we didn't have a lot of competition in that category. But what happened is they all gave presentations directly to you. So they came to one of our meetings and they gave a presentation not unlike what you just heard, but it would be the opposite, the ask for the funding rather than the report of evaluation. And you got to hear those presentations, kind of let them marinate. Then you're scoring them based on both their written application, which is sent to you, and the presentation that they gave publicly where they asked, you got to ask any questions, and they had to answer any questions. They also, if they got a question they couldn't answer in that moment, they had 1 week's time to submit a written response that I would email out. We didn't have any situation where somebody submitted a written response, so that didn't come up. You might not remember anything about that because we didn't have that come up. But then we had a special meeting, and that meeting was then to vote. And so because this is a public commission, all of your deliberations must take place in public. And so that's the difference between that and more of a closed jury meeting. And they're asking for large sums of money. They're usually established organizations. They should be fairly accustomed to that kind of forum and process for asking for funds. But for the commissioners, it's important for me to understand what your needs would be around having those deliberations. So what I did is you submitted to me evaluation sheets after that first presentation. And after you got any chance to kind of think about it, I think you had a week or two is how we structured it. And then you emailed those to me. I came up with kind of I put them all together. We did a ranking. We did all the quantitative analysis that kind of ranked them. And then I kind of took all of your feedback and tried to summarize to make a proposal that I thought reflected what we saw in your individual scoring. That proposal was presented by me to you during the voting time, and you got to talk about it, and that was the moment to ask any questions. I think this past year, that was where confusion kind of emerged for us as a commission. So that was where the discussion could take place, and I think not a lot of discussion happened, so maybe it felt like the process moved a little quickly, was my initial impression from the commission when we did that this past year. But that was where it was designed to ask more questions. And they, are to be asked in public, and maybe share any insights you had from your particular feedback, and then how it was summarized, right? But then after that, there was a proposal. Somebody would motion to a vote. You can make amendments and changes just like we do anytime we vote. So you could, make a motion that actually is a little bit different from what I propose. I think I said that your three options were to accept the proposal as it's written, accept the proposal with some amendments, or reject the proposal completely, right? So those were the options. But with amendments could mean that you could kind of suggest a different proposal if you felt you needed to. And then all of that would then culminate in the voting at that meeting. And that's when Tier 3, because it's in public, in theory, they could come to the meeting or be listening on TV and learn right then whether they got a grant or not, right? So that's how the Tier 3 process works. That's my long-winded version of how we do it now. Any questions before I talk about my proposed changes? My proposed changes aren't much to the process itself, to be honest with you. It's more timeline.
Just one clarification, Rachel. The 70%, that we fund up to 30% of the total cost of the program. It's not a direct 70% match. They have to have 70% of their funding from somewhere else.
They have
we will
to have
fund
a cash
up
match
to
of
30%.
70%.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I was sort of looking on here. I thought part of our discussions last year, in order to help the year progress, or so we wouldn't have a gap year in applications, was that we'd have a little bit of time this year to sort of think about what we thought worked and go over all these things. Is that what we're supposed to be doing today?
That's right.
Got it. Okay. Because
Yeah.
it seems like from this proposal, you're wanting things to start quite a bit sooner,
Yeah.
which wouldn't give us really any time to discuss something today and change it if it's going to be going out in probably 3 weeks.
Well, what I hope to do is discuss that today, come back with something that actually represents well our discussions, your concerns, hopefully alleviates any kinks that we need to work out, and that I can also share that with you, and that can be through email or whatever before it ever gets released to the public, that you'd get some time to see things before they go out. So can I go over these changes maybe first, and then we'll kind of circle back to overarching feedback? Okay. So a couple of things that I just want to do to kind of streamline. I'll talk about timeline in a moment, but let's talk first about some of the simple things. So arts in the schools, I don't think that needs to be its own grant category. I think it should be named as a special award within the Tier 1 category, because it has had a pool of up to $3,000 available. And we will still have that pool, and we will still have an Arts in the Schools award. But our Tier 1 category is between $500 and $1,500. We have on occasion, multiple occasions, through Arts in the Schools, funded multiple projects. So that usually means funded a project that's $1,500 or $500 and one that's $2,000, So it's often been more than one. And I think it's fine that it goes up to $1,500 per award. But we've also had applicants this past year, when we did them kind of on a similar timeline, we had only one application in Arts in the Schools. It got automatically funded. We had one application. But there were actually a number of applications in the Tier 1 category that in theory could have gotten an Arts in the Schools grant. They just didn't apply for that category. So my thought is we just need to have it be a checkbox that says I meet the eligibility with the eligibility described of Arts in the Schools, and I would like to be considered for that award. And then Tier 1 can select and rank and do everything they normally do, and then we'd also pull aside a list of all of the things that qualify for Arts in the Schools, and they could decide, well, actually, we're going to give these 3 Arts in the Schools grants, or these 2 or that one, and now there's a little bit more funding available for another Tier 1 to be funded. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I actually think it'll make our lives a lot easier. Arts in the Schools has been a separate application for not a whole lot of reason. It has different, it has on occasion different qualifications or goals, I should say, that they ought to meet. And I think we can simply have a little extra written response plus a required letter of the school if they want to be considered for that award. And it would just invite them to add that onto their application if they check that box. That's what I'm proposing. I think that would be pretty easy fix for something that just kind of ends up being confusing and people not sure which category to apply to. We can just make it award within the category. Tiers 3 will occur earlier, so my idea is to have Tier 3 be a process that would occur this fall, particularly in November, and we could have a November 1st deadline. That would mean that I would propose something like November 12th, which is our commission meeting, to be the meeting when you hear presentations. I would not have grant presentations scheduled that night. You'd hear them instead of your grant presentations for that agenda. November 19th, then, we would call a special meeting, so that'd be the following week. We called the special meeting again on a Tuesday at 4:30 because we figure if it works one week of the month, it might work another pretty well. So hopefully, if you know now that that could be potentially a date, you could hold that date. But that would be when we would need quorum to make a vote. And ideally, we'd like to have you all here on the 19th. It would actually make the 19th the more important date. Even though your commission meetings are always important. Last year we flipped it. We had the special meeting be the off week, but just with this timeline, it might work better to have the special meeting be your voting meeting. And then November 22nd is when I think I could, for certain, and they will have heard it on TV, our meetings are televised, but they would get an official notice from me that they received the grant. So that means at the latest, they would know whether they got the grant by the 22nd of November. And for, folks connected to the university, et cetera, this is right before fall break. I mean, it's with a substantial amount of time to kind of know in advance that you have the award, as opposed to what we had done last year, which was they got notice, I think, around like March 22nd, or something around March 20th maybe, 26th. So this represents a number of months sooner, and I think that might be appealing to the Tier 3 grantees. The proposal then is to just move everything up 1 month for the rest of the tiers. So I typically have a deadline of the middle of February. Now we're going to do, if possible, a January 15th deadline for Tiers 1 and 2. That's inclusive of arts in the schools. February 1st, we'd have our first jury meeting. We would intentionally jury Tier 2 first. The other thing I want to point out is that this does enable that if somebody applies to Tier 3 and they are not awarded funding, that they can actually apply for a lower category because they haven't missed the deadline, right? So then if we have really stellar festivals that we just didn't have enough money to fund, but we might want to fund at a lower level, they now are enabled to apply, and I think that's a real good benefit of this new timeline. The other thing I'll say is that during Tier 2, may allow for us to also have some, like for instance, if there was a Tier 2 jury and they found that they had X amount of dollars to give out, just because we calculate based on percentage of the number of applicants, as I'll take some administrative work behind the scenes. But if they, for instance, don't want to give out the full amount of money, let's say they're unimpressed with the bottom half of the applicants or something, and they're like, we actually have $1,000, but we'd just like to give to Tier 1. Let them fund another one. Let them fund an individual artist or something. There could actually be that possibility if we kind of jury in this way that's kind of scaffolding Tier 3, Tier 2 to Tier 1. So Tier 2 would meet on February 1st, that jury, Tier 1 in arts in the schools on February 8th. And then I imagine by February 15th, I could get official notice out to all of the grantees about whether they were awarded, as well as a press release out. Usually our press release does include a notice about when our sneak peek is, and I'm suggesting that it would include both orientations and our sneak peek dates. So the important dates for all tiers, then I would suggest February 26th and 28th for orientations 1 and 2. I usually offer the same orientation twice, kind of a different day and different time of day, so people got an option. I was able to get everybody through orientation this past time, so we didn't have anyone who was unable to make it, which was great. And then March 5th is when I would suggest our sneak peek happen. You might recall our last one was April 16th, so this represents before our grant period starts, because our grant period is April 1 to April 1, just gives everybody a little bit more time. And it really kind of makes us not have this like collision at the month of like March and April. Are just kind of nuts for the program, especially when we have one
Right.
staff person. It's hard to deal with like getting everybody's processed and all their grants signed, all the checks out, and also organizing the orientations and the jury. Like, it's just, I want to spread it all out a little bit more. This isn't too drastic of a change. It's actually only kind of off by a month, but I think it could make a big deal difference for us. And that would mean I would put a deadline of March 15th, and I would communicate that deadline because we do have a problem sometimes with people not signing their contracts in a timely way. So this hopefully will get people to sign their contracts. I'm not sure if we really would want to impose immediately like a firm consequence if they don't get their check signed, but at minimum I can very adamantly say that I'm not obligated to get them their check in a timely way if they haven't gotten their contract in a timely way.
How do you send the contract?
Huh?
How do you send the I'm sorry.
How do you
Yeah,
How do you
they
send
get
the
them
contract?
via email, but then what I did this past time is this past year was the first year they were required to attend an orientation. I made it a requirement of the grant. So then at the orientation, I had them all sign it. There were only a few people who, maybe for good reason, wanted to take some time to kind of look it over before they signed it, wanted to take it home. There were some Tier 3 grantees that maybe just had questions. They were like, oh, I want to put this through my legal department. So, you know, on occasion we can run into that. University, for instance, is one that has a grants and sponsorship office, so sometimes they want their office to sign things. So it can't always happen at the orientation, but I think I got something like 85% of them signed at the orientations, which was good. And then they can send them to me through email or drop them off.
Right. I just wondered if you used one of those like DocuSign or Secure
Yeah.
Sign, any of those programs that are starting to get more popular.
That's a good
Just to
question. I mean, I
see.
think we've had people that have sort of used that, you know, because they're able to send them to me through email sometimes. But we typically do a lot of paper stuff still, and I think one day it would be nice to get all these digitized, both on the application end and everything else.
Might save you a little time.
Yeah, it would. The other thing I want to mention, and I just put it on here so that we know, the way it worked out with the Poet Laureate jury, it just got a little delayed this past spring, the way the selection process worked. So we actually didn't have our Poet Laureate come on until July 1st, so that's fine. I actually don't think the Poet Laureate needs to be on the same schedule as the grants. We just kind of did that for ease last year. Didn't prove to be that easy, so it's okay. I think what I'll do is have that juried later when this is all kind of, you know, wrapped up. And that would mean that we'd have a May 1st to May 15th nomination period, so that does represent a change. One of the things we encounter with the Poet Laureate, and it's this very sweet problem, but I think a lot of people were like just not sure that they are like talented enough to be Poet Laureates or that they're deserving enough. And so what I wanted to do was create a twofold thing, and I've seen this done with a couple other projects I've worked on in here locally in the community, and that's to have a period of time that's called a nomination period. We're not actually having that nominator fill out a whole application for somebody. What happens is that's a time period where people can submit names of people they think ought to consider applying to be a Poet Laureate. And they would get a nice letter from me saying, hey, your peers think that you should apply. I would like to encourage you. This is a personal invitation to apply for the Poet Laureate this year. And I think that'll help give people a little bit more confidence that they need to apply. We might see more applications than we did this past year. So that's something I'd like to create as a nomination period. Then May 15th would be the deadline for applications. And I can even open that nomination sooner. I mean, it doesn't really matter. We could announce that sooner. But May 22nd then would represent a jury meeting for evaluating applicants. I give myself a period of time here. June 1st, it could be official notice to all applicants. June 15th is by the time that person needs to meet with me and sign a contract. And July 1st would be an official start date. Our current Poet Laureate has got till June 30th of next year, so that would be a really fluid handoff to the next person. But that's what I'm thinking for the Poet Laureate timeline.
What's the award for the Poet Laureate? Is it
Yeah.
financial?
So what they get is they get a $2,000 honorarium, and it's really just an honorarium. They work with me to initiate projects. They're able to apply that $2,000 to projects they'd like to do, but they can also just like keep it for themselves. It's their honorarium. They can choose what they want to do with it. A lot of times we encourage them to tap into our resources. So for instance, the Poets on a Park Bench is a project that is involving some resources of my staff time, my intern staff time has come along, but we've also had UPTV partner, so the city's resource of UPTV has been kind of a collaboration there. So we let out time use existing resources. Will Rieger, our current poet laureate, is going to host another open scene, things like that. But they can also initiate their own projects, and that's what he's doing too.
Yeah, we're trying to do something through the in-school programs too.
That's
When we
right.
go into the schools with live music, that he would come and do a reading, or we might adapt some music underscoring his poetry. So I'm just waiting for the letters to come back now from the schools.
That's great. And so, like, our current poet laureate it's really a pilot program. It's the first time we've had it. And so we're trying to establish some things that might be things that the next poet laureate could carry forward, but really that person is kind of empowered to initiate their own projects in the way that they think civic events that could grow the poetry community ought to look. Yeah.
I have a question. It's about the granting time. I noticed at the top you said if the tier 3s, or there's sort of this scaffolding effect. If you're not awarded in one tier, you could sort of roll down to the next. I don't know if that's. I mean, I didn't know that was sort of an objective that we had. If someone applied at the tier 1, I sort of was under the impression that was both, like for emerging artists or for people who then also fit into that category of the monetary amount. But if I was an emerging artist and applied to tier 1, it would be sort of feel a little bit squished if I knew that tier 3 people who just didn't get anything were then also sort of rolling back and going into the tier 1 category.
Yeah, no, I don't think they could roll back, especially not tier 3. What it means is that they would know in November whether they got the award,
Right.
and if they chose to, they could write a new application to the other deadline.
Right, it's not automatic, right. But I guess I don't know how we would assure people or why we need to have that as an option.
I don't think it would not be an option because we can't tell people they're not allowed to apply for a grant. You know what I mean?
Well, currently, can they apply for all 3 tiers if they want?
They can apply in up to 2 categories, so they couldn't apply in all 3 tiers.
Right.
But I wouldn't
Will that
see-
still be the same?
Hmm?
Will that be the same, only they can only apply to 2 tiers?
I would imagine so, yeah. I mean, they can do up to 2 applications, so I guess it doesn't, they can be in the same tier, they can be in 2 different tiers. But, if you were applying in tier 3 and you had to have a 70% cash match, that means you're doing one heck of an event 2 different times in the year. And it's just probably unlikely, right, that we would have 2 applications in the same grant category.
Right, so
For
then.
tier 3 anyway.
Right, so if they're not funded for whatever reason, and then they reapply in tier 2, it would be likely that they would, like you say, they're already well established, they already have all these extra things. That seems like they should apply to tier 3, and then it's very sorry you didn't get it, but that's sort of a different strategy or a different type of thing than tier 2. So I guess I don't know how we would help the tier 2 people to see that they're being adjudicated on people of the same festival or events or programming or artistic scale as people in that same category, and not just people from tier 3 who didn't get it who then reapplied. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I tend to see is that people are really considering a number of things when they're applying to whatever category, right?
Mhm.
And so one thing that we know is that we didn't have a lot of applications in tier 3 that we really,
Right.
And I think if anybody is going to apply in tier 3 that didn't this past year, it's probably some of the perhaps bigger events from our tier 2 category who were wagering whether or not they should.
Right.
And the other thing is, I think what we're hoping with these grants is that they effectively are somewhat of seed grants. Like, we want them to kind of graduate from like tier 1 to maybe tier 2 to maybe tier 3 to maybe fly the coop and find funding from somewhere else, like really grow big at some point and find different kinds of sponsorship. I think that is ideal for us. But you moved up. I wondered if you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brandon Boyes. I'm the Economic Development Manager. I work with Rachel in Community Development. So welcome to our new members. I usually sit up here, but we are a crowded commission for once again.
That's right.
The point I wanted to make is along the lines of what Rachel's talking about. Tier 3 has a history outside of the arts program, and that is that these major festivals were getting funding from from the city directly, and they were going to the city council to make those presentations and achieve those approvals. That process, right, was a different process. It was a less structured process, and it largely revolved around the fact that there's really only so many events in our community that are of that scale, right, and could qualify for it. And often there were questions about, well, am I big enough to qualify? And the goal was to roll that funding into the arts and culture program. Actually, at the same time, we were transitioning from a public arts program to an arts and culture program, both to establish a more structured process, but also to provide an opportunity to imbue and guide these major recipients of funds with the missions and goals of this commission as they're now defined. So we're really talking kind of about a finite set of events. First of all, it was very competitive last year in that everybody they got more or less what they had gotten in previous years. And then we had one application, the Boneyard Arts Festival, graduate from effectively a Tier 2 and get substantially more funding through Tier 3. The problem is, as commission members, the structure of Tier 3 is that you're supposed to give out a $5,000 grant or less. Several of these organizations might be happy with $4,000 or $3,000, but that's not how Tier 3 is set up. So it puts you in a difficult position if you're going to be forced to make a decision to completely defund one of our major events versus allowing them to have a go at another category. So there's sort of that flip side of it as well, where we want to make sure that there's options available for these events to still receive funding, even if they don't qualify at that level. And then, as Rachel noted, we have some great events that are currently solidly in that Tier 2 bracket, but again, we don't want to put them in a position of risking getting nothing when they try for more money. That's what this is designed to do, is allow for it to roll back from the Tier 3 to the Tier 2 process.
Go ahead, Barb.
Do you envision any change in the criterion for each award level? How they would be eligible?
Funding levels are different and requirements are different
Right, but I
already,
mean,
and I think
within
those
that-
don't need to necessarily change. The only thing
Yeah.
I mentioned, again, was maybe that Tier 2. I'm inclined to say that 50% matching funds cannot be 100% in-kind matching. I think we could do something like up to 20% can come from in-kind donations or in-kind sources, but then the other 25 ought to come from cash. I think that would ensure that we have some level of cash going in.
So as long as the applicants understand what all the qualifications are.
Yeah. I hear your comment, Janelle, and correct me if I'm wrong, as just a concern about like increased competition at the lower levels. Is that what you're worried about?
No, I think the competition is fine.
Yeah.
I was surprised we didn't have more actually last year at the
Right,
Tier
in
3
Tier
level.
3, yeah.
I think the competition is fine. I just think the people's viewpoint, or like, am I big enough, am I small enough, or, this is my first time applying, and I've never done this before, I don't know what in-kind looks like exactly, and I'm in the same category as someone who just didn't get their Tier 3. And that's a very different granting person who maybe has someone who does grants for them, or they've applied before, or they just applied. It's going to look like a very different application.
Yeah.
And even though we'll have seen it already one time, it's going to skew heavily to the people who just didn't get. Do you know what I mean?
I will say I'm not sure it is as easily defined in that way, because what I've seen even in like Tiers 1 and Tier 2 is we get applications from the Urbana Free Library, the University of Illinois, like a lot of people that actually do have whole grant departments and stuff helping them on some of the applications they're doing. Also, if they have a grant department, doesn't necessarily mean they're getting help. Like, it's kind of infinitely more complicated, I think, and even all the categories that we have. All this to say is that I just don't know if it's as clean and clear as even like these groups represent more established things all the time than like the things that apply for smaller, because some organizations, because they have access to a bigger budget, actually choose to apply for a smaller grant, kind of out of this idea of like, I shouldn't hoard that many, like that belongs in the hands of like individual artists or new and emerging groups, and like I'm gonna not be a huge organization asking for a huge amount of money too. let it spread around a little bit more. You know, people have different sets of values that I think go into how they apply for grants too. So it gets complicated. I think for us, what I saw this past year was that we had a lot of people that I think would have loved to apply for Tier 3, but are not able to do that 70% cash match. And they're just, they don't have the established kind of financial picture that we're looking for them to qualify for Tier 3. And then I also think what I saw is I had a lot of heartbreak, and during a couple of the jury meetings for myself, it was just, and not the Tier 3, for Tiers 1 and 2, it was hard. I saw a lot of wonderful things just
It's
not
always
get funding
hard.
because it's always hard, right? So we don't have enough funding. And so there were, I mean, I think the tough thing for us is figuring out, is there a process if like one jury really feels like, wait, we've funded everything, we're really excited about funding, and we still have some money left. Are we in a position to tell them, like, give that money out because we assigned you this much money to give out? Which is the ask for Tier 3, and it does have to remain that way. I think for your category, you do have a certain amount to give out because we've established that as stipulations around Tier 3. But Tiers 1 and 2 might have a little more flexibility. So I guess in my perfect world, I would love for that jury to be able to say, I'd like to gift this to the other jury that hasn't met yet. Because a lot of times, too, the one thing I will say is Tier 1 does have a lot of individual artists, does have a lot of, like, new, emerging, innovative, sometimes even wacky, dare I say, ideas, but really interesting things kind of emerging from individual people that do feel maybe a little more risky, right? So, but it might, there's a lot of applicants in those lower categories. And so giving them more opportunity, I think, could be good by allowing people to kind of, and we can put stipulations around that if we choose to go that route. Like maybe it's just up to like $1,000. Can you shift to another, to Tier 1 from Tier 2? Also, it probably won't come up because people just want to fund as many things as they possibly can on the jury. So I don't see it as happening as often as I almost wish it would. I have the benefit, of course, of seeing all the applications, and then I'm just a facilitator. So I read every single one, but the jurors usually read just the ones in their category. So I have that bigger picture of knowing, like, oh man, really like this other one to get funded in this other category. But it's hard, you know. We have to go on what we have in front of us.
Rachel, what are examples of in-kind?
That's a good question. So in-kind's anything but cash. So it could be like the IMC let us know they're gonna let us use their space, and their space is their contribution as a sponsor. Or Stevie J Broadcasting said they're gonna put 40 episodes on the air, and this is what the value of that is, right? So this is the cash value of that, but there's no cash involved. So anytime that you're getting something of value where there's no cash changing hands, that's an in-kind contribution.
How do you quantify that cash aspect, though, or the cash value?
Right, and that's especially hard when we get into artist fees. It's hard for artists in general to quantify. It's hard for all of us to quantify our labor, let's be real. It's especially hard for us when we're doing creative work or work that we're passionate about. So we don't have, per se, a guidebook for how we tell people to do that. Obviously, if you're working with a company or an organization, they should know the cost of the things that they're giving you. Usually an organization offering space has a space rental policy. They know per hour what their space is worth. When it comes to an artist, maybe like your friend helped you with web development, and you effectively hired them, but they're working for free, right? And they're offering you this thing as an artist. So then having like them kind of quantifying that can be difficult. And so we can have some level of help with that. I mean, one thing we reference is also the cost or the value of volunteers. So every state in the United States has a rate of the value per hour of a volunteer. It's a lot higher than you'd imagine. It's really amazing. Talk about some equity in a good way. If you actually look at what they ought to be paid and the value of a volunteer hour, I think it's something like $24 an hour or something like that in the state of Illinois. I can't recall, but you can look it up. So we can sometimes encourage them to use resources like that, and if they do, they can always like attach or reference, I'm getting my number from this like state-defined number, something like that. But a lot of times what we see most often is in-kind donations of space, equipment, food, things like that. And so a lot of times the restaurant or the organization can come up with that number pretty easily.
Have you ever not funded all of the money from Tier 3?
We've only had Tier 3 exist for 1 year.
This is the first year we've done it.
So, no, because last year you gave it all out.
Have we ever not funded all of the money we had in the grant program?
No.
We've always
No.
given it out, and I think that's kind of what our call to do is. Of course, if you really felt like, oh my goodness, all of these applications are horrendous, maybe we'd be in that position, but most often we're in
That's
the
never
opposite
happened.
situation where we're like, wow, there's so many good applications,
Well, I'm
and
just-
we just wish we could fund them all.
I was asking because it is curious to me that we don't have an established standard when we created the tiers as far as to what happens in that situation. Should a jury decide that they do not want to award all of the money, or they
Well,
don't
right
feel
now, they don't
justified
have
in
that
it?
option, that's what I'm saying. Right now, their option
Right.
is you have to award all the money.
Right.
Mhm.
And how much is in Tier 3 to give away this year?
It's the same amount as last year, so what was that, 30 or 35,000? I'm trying to remember.
I think we probably should establish some sort of rules to say that. And listening to it, I would totally not be unopposed to allowing one jury to allow money to slide to another jury that is going to be voting later on down the line.
It'd really only go one way, though.
I know,
You know, it'd
but-
only be Tier 2 to Tier 1. If you,
Yeah.
you know, I think Tier 3, it's just not going to come up, I doubt it. I think we're going to
Yeah.
see more competition in Tier 3, not less. And, you know, we had organizations this year apply for less than the 10,000, and I anticipate, I can almost guarantee you that everybody who applied last year will apply again, and they will now apply for the full 10,000.
I understand.
So we're inevitably going to have more
But-
competition this year.
It's a feeling, not
Okay.
guaranteed.
Right, right.
And, you know, while we can be as optimistic as we like, it's not always the case that we are right when we are optimistic. So
So what is the policy that that you think would be a good idea? I'm sorry, I kind of lost the plot.
no worries. We're talking about the possibility that the Tier 3 jury does not receive a pool of applicants of such quality that they want to give away all the money. What do we do if that money remains? And should they have the option to pass that money to another tier, should they so choose? That's what we're talking about.
It's a fair question, I don't know, but do you know of any city rules that we should know about with respect to that?
I don't believe there is a specific rule in that regard. I mean, it ultimately, for Tier 3, the commission is deciding the award, right? You as a body,
Right.
Rachel will be making a proposal based on all your feedback, and that's just try to help with your group process to guess at what's the consensus. But once we enter that meeting, whatever happens at that meeting, if it's moved by this commission, that's what the award will be. However, the remainder of the process after that, the other tiers, those are decided by the jury as well. And we have more flexibility administratively were there not to be all the funds used for Tier 3. I don't see what would prevent the funding to be reallocated to those other tiers. However, I think the more likely scenario, and really what we're trying to encourage with this proposal of giving enough time for Tier 3 applicants, if they were to be not funded altogether, that they could apply, we're hoping that's going to have the effect of increasing competition in Tier 3. It makes it easier for folks to apply because they know they don't lose everything. It also puts the commission in a position that if you were to choose not to fund something that has received funding for a long time, for many years, you're not completely taking them down to zero. They can still apply and compete again, and maybe still receive some funding.
And for those of you maybe new to this process, and even as a refresher for those who have involved the past year, previous to this year, we had something called the Special Event Fund, and that was an ask direct of City Council for special events. And so things like the Sweet Corn Festival, Pygmalion, Folk and Roots, they had all received funding that way, and it was different. It wasn't a competitive application process. It was the time has I mean, it's still competitive, but it's like the time has arisen for me to come ask because we have an event coming up and we want the city to support it. And
There wasn't like a set day that you came when you needed it. And so organizations were used to a relationship where they would give that proposal to city council, and oftentimes city council would fund them. And so organizations like even Urbana Business Association really for a long time have kind of seen this funding as funding that they're used to getting, you know. And so even this year felt that they had been defunded because for example, Urbana Business Association had often received 15,000, and so ours only go up to 10. So when they were fully funded at 10, it still represented significantly less than what they'd gotten in previous years. So that's just some context to understand that like funding has shifted and changed over time. We absorbed that money, so now the Arts and Culture Commission administers this as a Tier 3 category. But our grants, including our festival grants, never went up to that amount of money. I mean, I think ours said that they went up to even more than 5,000, like maybe up to like even 10. But the reality of things is that they were not often going above, I think, 5,000 in the festival category. So this is substantially more money in the past year than we are accustomed to giving out through our program, and it does represent a change. But the people that have gotten it and have applied for it, at least this past year, are people that are used to asking for this money from the city and have come to almost expect it and consider it a part of a relationship that they've had for many years with the city. And I don't say that to say they have to be funded forever or that it looks just like this and it can't ever change. It has changed. But I say that to kind of give you context of understanding, you know, what's the landscape here of how this grant program is shifting and moving.
What's been the acceptance, rejection for grant proposals?
That's a great question. So, like this past year for tiers 1, 2, and 3, we funded 35 projects. We had over 60 some applications, I think close to 70. So, you can see the math there. In tier 3, because we didn't have a lot of competition, and I do say I think it's because we didn't have a lot of competition, we were able to fund all of the applications. So I have an almost fully fund, I think.
Yes,
$50 less on one application, but otherwise completely fully funded. So I don't know that that is a guarantee for this year, and that will be hard on those applicants who not only have received funding this year, but may have, in some cases, a long history of receiving funding for these events that they believe the city ought to care about because they're really contributory to the landscape of the downtown and beyond.
I just want to reiterate that the commission's role is for awards of 5,000 and above, and that's what's defined in ordinance. So that's where this, you kind of fall off a cliff. The commission isn't going to have the authority to give out $4,500 awards to squeak the numbers to make it, work. It really is they're meeting this minimum level of quality in that competitive pool. In the eyes of the commission, again, as you decide at a live meeting, or they're not, and that was a key reason why we wanted to look at this structure, because we don't want to put you sort of in a situation of those applicants, because again, they can be here, they can public comment. It's not a closed-off process where they're going to want to appeal or otherwise. There's effectively a structured automatic appeal process, which is to enter a different competitive pool.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you think you're going to get any kickback from the earlier start time this year? Or do you think people will welcome it?
I think they'll welcome it.
Yeah.
What we get most often is a request that it happen earlier. I don't think we're going to see that request we never see it from individual artists. I mean, I get 95% of the applications come at 11:59 the night it's due.
Yeah.
I'm not
Human
kidding.
nature,
It's like so affirming for people who are procrastinators. Like, no, you're in good company. Everyone applies at the 11th hour. However, for tier 3 applications, because they're running major events, they already know they're running this event, whether you fund them or not. They're just either running it with a lot of stress and trying to find funding sources from somewhere else. And if they have to find funding from somewhere else, they want to know early that they have to do that.
Yeah.
So I think, we've been asked by some of these applicants, like, could we fund in like 3-year increments? Can I know I have guaranteed funding for the next 3 years? Can you do it a year early? This is not going to satisfy those things. Like, this is only a little bit of a change. For us, it's a bit of a significant change. But, it's not it's not even going to satisfy the wildest dreams of what Tier 3 applicants would probably want to see. And you can understand it when you run a major event. You know, you start thinking about that event well a year or two in advance.
That's a question. So we'll meet in October and then like one more time, and then November we're going to have these presentations and deliberations. So just being a new member or commissioner, and maybe the others feel the same way, will we be getting information on priorities, or if there's a certain direction that we may be taking? I'm just thinking that an applicant like the Sweet Corn Festival, for instance, is quite different than like an African festival, arts festival, or something that may be trying to be more emergent. And I guess, my second question, or another, just along those same lines of thinking, just what's been done, or what are we doing to try to build up new programs?
Just
because the Sweet Corn Festival to me seems like such an institution in itself, and I'm sure it still needs support and funding, but I would hope businesses could also, I'm sure there are sponsors for that, but that just seems very different than sort of a grassroots initiative like this thing going on at the Lincoln Square.
Well, but those groups that are just starting up can apply for the Tier 1 and Tier 2.
Right.
Work their way up, basically.
Okay, well, I mean, they may want to apply even for a Tier 3 or whatever they apply for. I guess my question is just, like, as a body here, is there some...
We're given a sheet for scoring.
I'm sorry, a scoring sheet?
Yeah,
okay.
So there's a rubric that we use for scoring the grants.
And then
That's
their
helpful.
application does require of them, like to the question of like perhaps diversity and inclusion, their application requires that they have and submit a plan, or at least detail a narrative of how they will concretely reach out to different populations. And so they're evaluated on that question. I think that was actually a part of the evaluation criteria, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
And they're evaluated on a number of things related to the design of their program, how they're reaching out, whether it's innovative, those kinds of things certainly are taken into consideration. The other thing I'll say is that one thing that I usually, so I give grant workshops leading up, and I'm intentional about where they're given. We give them, we give one at Parkland, we give one at U of I, we give one at the library, but I also try to give them in different areas around town that I think may also be underserved areas to encourage people to apply. So last year that included doing a workshop at Salt and Light. We had a workshop scheduled for the Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center that had to be canceled, but we had that one. We had we had one at the Co-op. We had one a little bit further in South Urbana. So we've had them kind of scattered throughout. I would like to, I also throughout the year give presentations. So at the end of this past school year, I met with all the teachers at the Urbana School District to talk to them about arts in the schools, about how they could use arts grants to infuse their classrooms. I met with the International Education Department, International Education at U of I, and talked to them. So I like to give like specific presentations, and I can also do them by request anywhere. So I would love to get ideas of new places where that can take place to try to encourage more and more applications. And of course that will increase the competition, but that is a good thing. And the other thing I usually say at these workshops is that a lot of grantors are asked, what do you tend to fund? That's like the fundamental question asked of a grantor, right? And I've sat for the past 2 years on the Grantathon panel at the U of I, and I represent our grant program there, but I'm sitting next to the Mental Health Board and the Community Foundation. And so I get to be the oddball in the room because we're arts grants, we're arts and culture, and they do a lot of social service things. And they have a lot of they have a lot of strict things that they fund. There is something that they tend to fund. But when I answer that question, I usually get to say there actually isn't something that we tend to fund. I think we prioritize trying to fund a diversity of projects each year. And for that reason, I don't ever have a good answer to that. Instead, I'm just like, we want to see innovation, we want to see growing new things. We actually don't want to see the same event be applied for like 9 years in a row. We want to see that event change.
Yes.
We want to see it grow and respond to a changing landscape. So I think that's some of the things I say in my arts grant workshop. And then the workshop walks them through the whole application experience. So they should be pretty equipped to apply after attending something like that. We don't require it to apply, but it's certainly, I think, helpful. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but that's a little bit what we try to do at least.
That's helpful, just since this is coming up like in a month or so, and we're being
Yeah.
asked to evaluate, it'd be just helpful to know. I just know that, yeah, when we apply for grants on campus, sometimes we know there's like priorities that the funder
That's
has,
true.
or, you know, if maybe in the future, I don't know, for instance, we could think about if a well-established organization were to work with someone, you know, from Salt and Light, or, you know, if we could
Right.
see more partnerships or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and so partnerships and collaboration are one thing. So there are a list, I should say, there is a list of priorities within our grant application. I can't quote them, but they do. They talk about like collaboration, partnership. I think there's like elevating cultural and artistic diversity, creating new spaces for public art, and like kind of cultivating new like landscapes or placemaking around art. So I will send them out to you because that might be good. They also all appear on our website under urbanaillinois.us/artsgrants. The other thing that I encourage you all to do, whether seasoned or new commissioners, is take a look at our listings of the previously funded grants. You'll get some evidence that I'm not lying when I say we fund a real wide array of things.
Yes.
But the other thing is you'll kind of get a sense of some of the different things we funded. This program has had a long history of funding lots of cultural programming, lots of individual artists starting new projects, pretty innovative things. But we've also seeded things, so you can see if you were to look back at like 2010 versus 2019, how people have kind of gone from a smaller grant to often getting funded at higher and higher levels, right?
Folk and Roots, yeah.
Folk and Roots is a
That's
great
one of the first
example of that.
examples I
I
can
think
think
of,
of.
but then
Far so
sometimes
far
we have
back.
the opposite happen, right? Like I think about Heartland Maker Fest. That's a great example. They were kind of increasing their funding, and then they got some other support, and so they asked us for less. And then this past year they got even less, and they were like, we asked for less because we realized we can do a lot with a little. So it really depends on the organization.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like we have the 2 festivals that are occurring this next weekend. We've got Pygmalion and the CU Black and African Arts Festival, both funded by us. I'm planning to be at both of them. So I hope that you'll also go out and just see some of the different things that we fund, you know. Can I ask for direct feedback about this timeline? Concerns? Also the Tier 3 process, like things that you want to make sure are included. Those of you especially who went through the process this past year, am I wrong in saying that there was a moment where it was like, oh, we're voting now? Yes. There was a moment that felt like that. And so I want to make sure that you don't find yourself in that moment of panic, like, wait, it's happening now? I know we had talked about the process, but maybe I needed to reiterate it, or we needed to go over it more or something. I think it's also just intimidating to evaluate projects in a public meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why what I do is I give you that opportunity to do that personal evaluation. It's considered a draft document. We talked about this last season, but like, you know, we talked with our legal department because it's a draft and I'm summarizing and it may then shift the overall evaluation. That is not FOIA-able, so you get to actually give some of your information in there, and you can be a little bit more honest, whatever you'd like to say. But then what I do is I'm still taking all of that and I'm creating a summary of feedback for each applicant, and as well as the justification that I'm seeing overall, as well as a recommendation. But I'm putting that together for you to then dissect as a group, and perhaps even influence or change if it doesn't feel that I've accurately represented something. And what I'm doing is doing both some math and kind of coming up with what I think numbers-wise you're talking about, but also I'm looking at qualitative feedback to get at that, right?
I have a thought. So Tier 2 and 1, I served on the Tier 2 jury last year and also participated in a Tier 2 grant recipient festival,
Right.
shirt of which I'm wearing right now.
That's right.
The Immersion Festival, which occurred at the IMC, was a Tier 2 grant recipient.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, looking at this timeline, that how much time was put into that grant application
That's right.
would be difficult so closely following the holidays. Like if you think about Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's happening, you basically got 2 weeks if you were busy with your family and you were doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
I know you moved it up a full month.
Well, and we'd still open it, so I'd open it in November.
I know, I'm just,
Yeah.
you
Or
kn-
not November, I'm sorry, like this next month if we
yeah,
wanted, yeah.
you know how,
I
you know how people
well, I know how
are.
people are. I mean, I voiced the same thing, especially like with not just holidays, but the university being closed. This is a university town and people are on vacation. So January 15, I know is a little tight. Like I know university usually comes back, Courtney, help me out. Is it like the 20th, 21st, whatever?
Not
It's usually
even,
that
almost to
week.
the end of the month.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking maybe compromise on half of a month fully in advance, maybe the end of January or the third week of January, just to give, one more week to people to wrap things up at the beginning of the year. I just know that would be difficult. I know with my personal schedule working on stuff, 2 weeks is not a lot of time, and it's an intense application if you want to do it right.
Yeah.
So, that's my thought. I don't know about Tier 3 because I didn't work on that one. If anybody has comments on that.
I mean, the real thing is that people have to plan ahead, but I know that's a hard thing. People are oftentimes doing these things belatedly. Gonzalo, I know you have to go, but do you have any opinions, especially given that we're talking about something that you've done now 3 times, apply for arts grant? I'm totally going to let you go if you need to leave.
No,
but yeah.
because I am just learning the
Yeah.
process, so for me it's a little bit difficult.
But what about
to-
the application deadline part? So you applied, I don't remember if you were somebody who applied the night before or you applied early, but
Yeah, but
January-
I think that applying earlier is better because it's give us more time for like preparing things and like for example in the case what the projects I was doing we have to ask people to participate, so a little more time is better to prepare
Yeah.
for that. So
And to also get contracts signed and that sort of thing too?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's also important.
Do you have an opinion versus January 15th versus the 30th? January 30th? Given the holidays and oftentimes winter break on campus or other things that happen largely in December on this time?
Yeah, I think that the holidays is an issue. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's especially the beginning the beginning of the semesters for people that are in some way connected with the universities is kind of busy. So
Yeah.
that should be an issue. Yeah.
What about after Martin Luther King Day? Is that too late? It's January 20th? It gives them one extra holiday day, but enough time after the holidays to start recuperating, and is that too late? Maybe?
We had this conversation on staff.
There
and I
is
told
no
Brandon
ideal date, I can promise
There's no ideal
you.
date, and I will say,
We have changed the date almost every year we've done
I
it.
know, and I will
Nothing
say
ideal
too
is
that,
coming up yet,
having
right?
been connected to the university for a long time, which I think if we looked at a lot of our grantees, a great number are connected to the university, whether they are simply students that are applying for grants or they're applying on behalf of a university unit. There are a number of people that have that connection. I do think that break is just a time when people do not often do work. They're spending
Yeah,
time with
sure.
their family. So it's if you did not get that done early, you probably are scraping to do it in the day before it's due when you got back. I'm not sure that will change, but I will say that January 15th is a time where at least students aren't necessarily back on campus yet. They're not even back in this town yet if they've left
Right.
town. The other thing you could consider, I don't know if it'd be an unorthodox idea, but having a soft deadline, a priority deadline earlier, during November. I don't know what the purpose of it would be other than get your applications in, don't procrastinate.
From an administrative perspective, we tried to work backwards
Yeah.
from the award date, and there's a few things about our grants program that aren't really like what other grants programs have, because we don't necessarily afford our staff enough time for the processing. And so that's one motivation for moving this up. We need a little bit more time between award and when funding actually starts, when projects are supposed to start.
I mean, the other option is
yeah.
moving the grant period. But that is going to make it difficult for people who have traditionally applied for events that happen in April, of which like Immersion was one. Boneyard Arts Festival wouldn't be eligible. And that's a big one, although technically if they were applying in Tier 3, they might be fine if we didn't move the Tier 3 grant period, but we could potentially have a different date of grants periods for the Tiers 1, 2. I don't know, that's an option. I will say, when I sit on that grants-a-thon, Mental Health Board, Mental Health Foundation, and the Community Foundation are both sitting there being like, oh, we give ourselves like 7 months to process a grant before somebody's allowed to use the money. They're like, what do you do, 2 weeks? And I'm like, yeah. We literally figured out in late March, and by April 1, they're allowed to start.
Is there a reason why we don't do 2 periods?
Like splitting up the Tier 3 versus 1 and 2?
Like having, applications due at one point? No, not between that, just even...
Oh, like grants twice in a year? Oh, God.
Yeah, I know that sounds like I know it sounds like a nightmare, but you only, I don't know, I guess people who are going to do stuff that happens between, June and December are working on a different timeline than people who want to do stuff in the beginning of the year.
I hear you. For my own sanity and the sanity of the program, I say that the difficult thing is that things happen all year long, and so there's things that I'm processing all the time. As you know, you get grant presentations after that happen. I'm issuing their check, I'm following up, making sure everything looks right in their final report, and asking any questions that maybe didn't get asked here. So I'm doing things throughout the year, and I do keep in mind a lot of times that like April 1 to April 1, because if I'm also, for us, the fiscal year too, it's just nice to be able to close out as much as I can the previous years before we enter into, July. I don't know. There's just a lot that can be helpful about the current, the current way. I wouldn't think it would matter if we like moved it back a month or something, but I don't know.
Well, we just don't have enough staff to do twice a year, I don't think.
Yeah, could be done. It just is like,
that
sounds like another thing. It doesn't sound super desirable to me. It's got to work on both ends, right? Both for the grant season.
It's not like we have huge amounts of money either. I mean,
yeah. The problem is because our amounts are smaller, we have more of them.
Right.
So we have a portfolio of 35 projects at a given time.
Right. There's a lot more administrative time involved. Yeah.
That's right. So, I don't know. I am hearing though, like, I think that it would be possible for me to change this from January 15th to like the 25th. Whatever.
That's magnanimous of you.
Like something in that week of like I'll look at days of the week, like maybe I can find a nice Friday or something around that date time that they can be due. Does that seem more desirable? That's a little bit what I'm hearing.
Monday's the 20th. It's Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
So after that, maybe then, or before it.
Yeah.
But that way they have the weekend to catch up.
But even
and
like
get
the
ready.
25th, I think that'd probably be fine if that's a Friday.
Yeah.
24th, yeah.
Yeah.
24th, math. 24th. I think I could probably do that. And then I could maybe even still keep the initial jury meeting on the 1st. It's just going to be a wild few days. The reason why I've got that be a whole 2 weeks of separation is because we read every single application.
On the jury, though.
Yeah, we read every single application. Although, one thing I don't do is I really do not open them before the deadline, and I guess I could start processing some of the other ones that apply early. Courtney's like,
no, I mean, we're in a community, and this process just has to work for everyone, and there's no single perfect date.
Yes.
As you said,
yes.
that is going to work for everyone.
We have tried many.
So, I mean, we can right, there are a lot of different moving pieces, so we just, just give each other the grace.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that something like the 20th then makes the most sense.
Yes.
That's
But
at least
gives them
10 whole
1 day's
days.
grace too, because that's a holiday.
Right.
So then they can get it in by the 21st.
Okay. That sounds
It'll
good.
probably still be a flurry no matter what you do.
It's going to be a flurry, but
Right.
yeah, it's going to be helpful to have our other staff person because we have this. It's also 6:20 and we should go. But
Well, and also if you are actually giving them the opportunity of starting in October,
yeah,
they only have themselves to blame.
That's right, yeah. So does it sound, I'm hearing February 21st deadline? Seem
February or
okay?
January?
January, excuse me, January 21st deadline. Last year it was February 15th, so it still represents a difference. And I'm going to maybe fudge around with these dates a little bit if I need to, but otherwise I'm going to try to keep them as much the same as I can so that we can kind of build out from there. But does that sound good? Questions about Tier 3 process. Do you feel like if you know for certain this is our moment to discuss and debate that we don't need to add another meeting or do something different?
This is a real basic question.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with something like a proposal for $10,000, does that mean that they have to come up with $7,000? I really don't quite understand.
So if they were applying for only $1,000, I'm going to do very simple math here. If they were asking for $30, they would have to come up with $70. Do you understand? So like they have to have 70% needs to be coming from them to fund the entire event. So their budget, when they give me a budget, needs to show the full budget amount and where the money's coming from. So you may not have seen this if you haven't applied for a grant, but we have like this little pretty simple budget sheet, and sometimes they submit supplementary sheets if they think it's too simple, but I still want them to fill that one out because we use the simple version. And that's really just like, what are your matching funds, what are you asking for from the city, and what if any in-kind do you have? And then what is the overall budget, right? And so Tier 3 does require for us to be talking about cash. It's cash only, in-kind does not count towards your 70%, if I recall.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So usually these are events with big budgets, right? Like Sweet Corn Festival, I don't remember what the total budget is.
Yeah, Pygmalion was
Pygmalion was like 400,000 something, right?
Yeah.
Like Sweet Corn Festival. So our 5 to 10,000 represents a pretty small drop in the bucket for their overall budget for these kinds of events. I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you, Courtney. Okay.
I'm sure it's a simple answer. It's a little overwhelming trying to think it all in.
That's fine. Any other questions or things that you would want to change about Tier 3? This is a question largely for two of you.
No, I haven't.
Because Jared came in right after this was happening, so you weren't involved with the Tier 3 this past year.
No.
He served on a jury for Tier 2.
No, I thought the process went pretty smoothly, honestly.
Okay. So otherwise, okay, accepting this as it is? All right, that's what I'm hearing. Wonderful. I'll change the dates a little.
To answer your question, it would be about $33,500 would have to be their total event budget to win an award of $10,000. So about 20,000 thereof they would have to be finding from somewhere else to make that work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And in my grant presentation, I have all those numbers. Like, I think it's something like the minimum in Grant 3 is like 16,000 something for just that, like $5,000. Yeah.
Be getting 60 from like somewhere else.
Yeah. So again, it would also be fun to have, if you ever want to come to one of my grant workshops, it's a great way to learn more about how we talk about the program too. Any other, I think that this sounds like I have a clear picture anyway, I think, of what we need to do to move forward. I'm going to put this together. I'm happy to maybe send even just like the materials before they're released to the public out to the commission for just a look over through email, and then get any feedback you might have at that time, and then be ready to send these out pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good.
This is the thing you get to vote on that's, really doling out money every year. So it's the Tier 3 hopefully will be a very exciting process for you all.
Okay.
So do we have to vote?
Very good.
Is this something we need to vote on, or is this?
Do we vote on this?
I don't think you need to vote on it per se.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wanted to have a discussion.
That's fine. Okay, did anybody else have any announcements they wanted to make before we adjourn?
Just the announcement to join us after this time at Analog, please. I bought food and reserved a spot, and I noticed a lot of people left, so I'm hoping
Yeah.
that you all are coming.
Okay. Oh, I did want to mention that Jazz Walk's going to be this Friday at Meadowbrook,
Yeah.
5:30 to 7:30. It's always fun.
Yep, and I'll mention again the Pygmalion Festivals this weekend, as well as the CU Black and African Arts Festival. Not this weekend, excuse me, the next weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got some busy weekends coming up in Urbana. Get ready.
Okay, I move we adjourn. So, second. We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.